This is Chris Bentivegna, aka Benti, he of Twitch, he of Playback TV, he of Twitter, he of the general internet, and I have just stepped into the Vactor-Verse.
I am Vactor, and this is the Vactor-Verse. Today on the show, I have a very special guest, Mr. Chris Bentivegna, aka Benti. He's a Twitch affiliate, an enjoyer of film and nerd culture, also a Boston sports fan that often hates other Boston sports fans. So, Benti, thank you very much for joining me in the Vactor-Verse today. How are you doing, sir?
Vactor, thank you for having me. I feel like I have to explain that Boston sports fan part, which is just basically there is this idea with Boston sports fans that we're like very high and mighty. We always think we should win. And I hate a lot of those Boston sports fans because I at least remember a time before there was like the city of champions and that kind of stuff. They feel entitled. And I'm just like, please shut up. Please. Especially on Twitter and such, because I am like a big live tweet. Well, we'll see. I mean, the heat wave is just being in this area because they built this city on a swamp. They're like, hey, let's make a national capital. And we're going to see what happens. We found this swamp. What happens if we just put the nation's capital on this swamp? I'm sure nothing bad will come of that. And then the humidity and the heat comes along. They're like, oh, something bad did happen. And for me, as a larger man, you know, humidity is not exactly good for me. We'll say that.
And I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm in Arizona. It's a dry heat.
It doesn't matter when it's 120 degrees.
It feels like as soon as you step outside, you are putting your head inside an oven. And we're on like a 19-day streak of it's like the hottest whatever. And so, yeah, it is very hot out here. But it's cool indoors, which is why I don't like to go outside very much. And I'm here with my friend Benti, and I want to get his canon events. And Benti is very unique individual because he has a Venn diagram of things that kind of cross over, whether it's video games, comic books, Star Wars, and Star Wars in particular, I really am fascinated by. So I want to get your Star Wars canon event first. What was it that kind of hooked you?
So Star Wars, if we're going to talk about like nerd culture, I know there's other podcasts that refer to it as fandom. I don't like that word, but the nerd culture idea that Star Wars was really like the first thing. For some background, I was born overseas, not military. My dad was just working there. No, I'm not that special, but that's where they were. And the company my dad worked for, I'll just say it was Avid Technology. So a lot of movies. So if you know anything about film and digital editing, Avid, he worked for Avid. So he had an office with tons of movies, and he had an editing system set up for hobby editing. And he had this like tiny TV on the floor, and it had been like 4 or something. This was in Ireland. And I was like going through his VHS because I'm like, whatever, I'm a 4-year-old, just la 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 la. And I found the VHS for the original Star Wars trilogy, and it was pre-special editions because this was like
yes.
And I think I shared it with you in our it was the original Star Wars poster, the one with I'm sure you'll drop it in here right here, but the one with like Luke with the lightsaber into the sky and like Leia, and I'm like, this looks cool. And I think I grabbed the VHS off the shelf and I was like, Dad, can I watch this? And he's like, yeah, sure. Here we go. I think he's pulling it up here.
Yes.
But yeah, like it may not have been this exact like VHS box, but it was that poster. Everyone knows like that original Star Wars poster. And I'm like, this looks cool.
Yes.
And he's like, I could watch it. And I was just awestruck at the time.
Man, that's fascinating because especially in today's culture, like the pre-special editions are not, referred to or referenced a lot. And I come from, because I'm old, I come from that standpoint where I grew up with the pre-special editions. And in my mind, I'm always like, whenever I'm watching the new versions, they change that. And I find that fascinating to have those two sides of the coin of Star Wars. Of Lucas said this was his original vision, who knows how much of that,
which he's all in the rights to do. He has all the rights to do.
And
have you heard of the despecialized editions?
Yes.
Boy, you're about to tell me that you have them.
I did at one point. Actually, you know what? I might. I need to check my my Star Wars shelf here. I might still have those. But
so
yeah,
a job I worked at, the guy who was like ostensibly my intern, he's like he was also into Star Wars. We're jumping around way deeper into the canon, but and he's like, I brought you something, and it was a flash drive where he had all the despecialized editions,
Like,
the questionable legality
yeah,
options on there.
somebody on, I think it was on Facebook. I ran into somebody and they're like, "Yeah, $5, I'll burn it onto a disc for you." I was like, "Yeah, okay." And he put like that cover on there. So I have a physical. I think I still have that, but I also have it on my Plex server, so I can just
Mm,
stream it whenever. But yeah,
allegedly,
those, yes, yes, I highly recommend those. The
allegedly.
despecialized are fan. But yes, continue with your canon event. I love hearing.
Yeah, so and then I also the other weird part with that is like I have and I'm sure if I asked my dad because he has like very selective memory, he's an a classic old fart now. I love my dad, but he probably would be like, I don't know, maybe. But I have this memory that for some reason I watched The Order as New Hope and then Return of the Jedi and then
Oh,
Empire Strikes Back, and there was no reason for this. I was like 4 years old at the time, but if I were to guess, it's probably because I'm like, Dad, I want to watch another Star Wars. Like, tell me. And he's like, okay, we'll watch Return of the Jedi. Because he's probably like, well, there's like Ewoks in this and like cool aliens. Like, I'm sure he'll be more interested in that. And he's probably right. Also, there's more of a dog fight I remember really enjoying in even as a 4-year-old, the big Battle of Yavin and New Hope. But to that point, like he's probably like, oh, this will be more enjoyable for his feeble little 4-year-old mind instead of Empire Strikes Back. So like, yeah, I have this weird memory of like that being the order that it came in. So, or
that's
not that it
interesting.
came in, but the order that I watched it.
Right.
So then the early to mid 90s, to give you like time frame, I'm born in 91. Again, not to continue to dox myself tonight. Good job, Chris. But around that time, that's when Hasbro and Kenner were kind of relaunching the Star Wars toy line.
Hmm.
I don't know this, maybe you know. Had they announced that the special editions were coming, or did they announce like the special editions and then it was like within like 6 months they were out?
Yeah, it was, I want to say it was like a year before.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so at that point we probably didn't know that the special editions were coming,
Hmm.
but they released that the relaunch of Star Wars toys. It was like the Power of the Force line, which in retrospect now is widely panned by people who love action figures. And he didn't have like a lot. He grew up in the '60s. Like he didn't have a lot of like GI Joe or Johnny West, like all those action figures at the time. And I think he saw that like I enjoyed these movies. This toy line had just come up. He had disposable income, and there was this opportunity for him to kind of give me what he didn't have. So,
Hmm.
which benefited me because all of a sudden there was all these Star Wars toys and lightsabers and like the Han Solo pistol with the sounds
Ooh.
and sound effects and stuff. And I just love that stuff. And again, in retrospect, it's like the worst toy line they did because it's like the one with like the super buff Luke Skywalker
Oh
and
yeah.
like the hourglass Princess Leia, and like Vader also looks like he has abs somehow. Vader does not have abs, guys. Like, let's be honest. But like, I now had all of these toys, and I could watch the movies. And then when we moved to the States, that was literally like when the special editions were coming up. I remember going
Ooh.
to the movie theaters to go see each of the special editions. I remember my dad like looking in the newspaper and being like, "Return of the Jedi is playing at 10 a.m. today. Like, let's go see it." He was a big morning person on that.
Nice.
I don't know what the brand of theater was. I just know like exactly where this movie theater is in central Massachusetts. But yes, I remember seeing the special editions all in theaters.
Okay, sweet. I was living in, I actually was military. My dad
Oh, okay.
was Air
You
Force.
got so
So
excited then you were like, "Oh, and another one? Did I find
yeah,
another one of
yeah.
these people?" I'm like, "No. He just worked for Avid, and they had a big office in Ireland." Okay, so
Oh
we were
man.
in Dublin.
Okay. I was in Japan at the time, and I remember the special editions coming out on VHS, that gold box, the trilogy set.
Yes, I think I had that too.
So that was a big deal for me at the time. And those VHSs had little featurettes, which was like not, DVDs now and Blu-rays, it's like we're accustomed to it. But back then, special features were like laser disc only. So that was where I first got a taste of, oh, these are all the scenes that were changed. And this was the things that was changed. The first of many changes that would end up coming out later as well.
My dad had a
But
coffee table book that was like all of the. I'm sure it's like a famous one because like the way it was set up. I just don't remember the exact name of it. I could probably send you a picture of it next week
was it
because where
black and
I'm,
white?
it's like black and gold and it comes in like a
Okay.
sleeve. I am okay looking past flaws because to me it is space opera. There's camp, like it's a different world. Like as long as you give me kind of the essence of what Star Wars is, I'll be happy.
Nice. Yeah, I think I'm similar to you in that aspect of I just like spending time in the world of Star Wars, and I'm not too beholden to, canon or anything that specifically, oh, it wasn't like that, pre Lucas, it wasn't, or pre Disney, it
Yeah.
wasn't like that, blah blah blah. I'm just along for the ride, and I liked Mando season 3. I had videos coming out as each
Yep.
episode was coming out, and I
You did a
I
great
just
job with them.
oh, thank you. I didn't see any specific, things that was wrong with season 3, and I'm looking forward
There's
to season 4.
there's definitely some problems with it, and like with the prequel trilogy, there's certainly there are problems there. Like in retrospect, and we can look at stuff critically, but also like understand where there's like enjoyment. I think that's kind of one of these things in the past 5 years that not to say that we can't have high highs in
Hmm.
nerd culture thing,
Right.
whether it's I'm gonna about to summon the discourse fairy. I'm sorry, like the Last Jedi being like unquestionably great. Don't at me, whoever you are out there. Like, or something like Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. Like, we know things that are like great and they have craft behind them, but we also can recognize too when something is just simply fun and we enjoyed it. The problem is when something's not enjoyable in these things, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely things that, from a story standpoint, or from a hey, this is taking too long. They should have cut 20 minutes out of this scene, or whatever it is, pacing issues like that.
See
I'll
Flash 2023.
Yes, uh-huh. So I think for the most part, I've enjoyed this Disney era of Star Wars. We've gotten some fantastic comics.
I was about to say that. Yep.
There's been some great video games that have come out. I've really enjoyed the Cal Kestis different the series of Jedi Survivor, and what was the first one?
Fallen Order.
Jedi Order? Fallen Order.
Fallen Order.
I've enjoyed both of those, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes out next. So, and there's been novels. There's been great novels that have come out. So I think this era, a lot of there are that certain section of the fans that are like, oh, they should have never they should have never got with Disney. They sold their souls and blah blah. And I feel like those are the same people who are like, the prequels are terrible. Lucas ruined my
No one
childhood.
will ever be happy.
Yeah, so I'm
I do understand some stuff when it comes to like EU because there are a lot of great EU characters and stories. Like for me, video games in general are something that's also like a big part of like my canon event, my nerd culture thing. And a lot of those Star Wars video games have characters in like they showed the Ubisoft Ubi or Ubi. What do you say?
I've said both because
Okay.
I've heard people say both, so it's just kind of depending on my mood at the time. Right now, I'm gonna go Ubisoft.
Okay, we're gonna use Ubisoft today. So if we have to issue a correction later, we'll do that. But they had their big trailer for their new game that's coming. That's their Star Wars game, and there's a mercenary character at the end of it. That's like I can't remember what he says his name is, but it's not Kyle Katarn, but he looks like Kyle Katarn, and everyone's
Mm.
like, I bet you that's a fake name, and they're bringing back Kyle Katarn. And let me tell you,
Ooh.
I am not a like. If it's not Kyle Katarn, I riot.
Yes.
Like he's got
Yes.
the like the shoulder patch on, and like we don't see his ship. It could be his ship. I can't. See, now I can't think of the name of the ship. That's gonna
Yeah.
bother me. Something Bird. I don't want to say Dirty Bird, but I'm like that's the Atlanta Falcons. But like, yeah, like those
The
Star Wars
Moldy
games, like
Crow.
the Moldy Crow. See, I knew it was a bird related.
Yes.
But like, we don't see the ship, and if it's Kyle, like we just brought Kyle Katarn. I think that's the thing. People want stuff from the EU that was like uncanonized and also like had its own set of problems. And because the Disney stuff isn't the EU they remember reading or playing games, it's like, oh, it's terrible. I hate it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not one of those that I'm so beholden and you can't ever change anything. It's for me, it's all about the story. If it's a good story if you're gonna make me care about the characters, that's all that I care about. Oh, the Moldy Crow was later replaced by
Yes,
Raven's
yes,
Claw. Sorry.
because in Jedi Knight in Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, the mold Jarek, when he captures Kyle Katarn and gives him an option whether or not he wants to go to the light side or the dark side. Jarek, if you remember, had the no eyes, very very scary looking character, especially for me, 8 years old or whatever at the time. He
Right.
offers him his choice between dark side or light side, and you can either save Jan, essentially your waifu, or you can go to the dark side and kill her. Either way, the Moldy Crow at the Valley of the Jedi, a great, awesome, like Valley of the Jedi. Like if we talk about like good EU stuff, unquestionably great. But it then tumbles to the end, and you have to get a new ship. So by the time Jedi Outcast comes out in 2001, you have a new ship.
Nice, man. I love a lot of Star Wars in video games. We could do a whole show on that, Knights of the Old Republic and all of those type of things. But
Games were important to me.
yes, I'm very curious because you, as a Twitch streamer and as a video game connoisseur, I want to know, what was your video game canon event? What kind of hooked you for life on video games?
So Star Wars is like one of the things, and then like video games are the other canon event. And I have to apologize if I talk too fast. That is my Northeast coming out, where we just start blending words together and Northeast speak. And then if I had drinks, you would hear me start to drop my R's like I'm Ben Affleck in a movie here.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it comes out. It comes out some from time to time, but we're not doing that. Anyway, so like unlike a lot of kids of the 90s and 2000s, I kind of had unsupervised access to video games. Probably way too young an age. Like I remember none of the games were like super intense with the exception of one. You know, like the most intense like Super NES game I had would have been like Super Punch Out, but it was really just playing like a lot of Super Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country. I played the old Mario games because of Super Mario All-Stars, but to be clear, there was a Super NES in my room with a little TV at like age 4. So that's where I say like a lot of the unsupervised access. There was also a Macintosh PC in my room, which my dad would do like other like work kind of stuff on, but there was one thing on there, and I mentioned there was one exception to the not super intense stuff, and Doom was on that computer.
Oh,
and
at 4?
At 4. When people used to say, remember that Jack Thompson guy? He's like, video games cause violence. I would always be like on the message boards being like, hi, look at me. If they did, I would be screwed up in the head right now, and I'm not. So it's parent stuff. But I also didn't go further than like the first world in Doom, because that's like when starting in chapter 2 is like when you go to hell, and like that's when the game got too scary for me. Right. But the other stuff like completely fine by me and all that. Dang. But yeah, I had like Doom in there. So like video games, so Christmas gifts became like video games and Star Wars stuff. Like the first big video game I can remember being a Christmas gift was Super Mario World 3, which is Yoshi's Island.
Ooh, yes.
That I can remember like having the box, and like those boxes were like a big thing. And then my older cousin Michael on my dad's side, rest in peace to Michael, but he was much older than me, and like he would also show me new video games. And I remember like really looking forward to our trips to Long Island, where like my dad's side of the family lived, because I'm like, oh, I get to like hang out with Michael, and he's gonna show me a bunch of new video game stuff. Like he, you know, I mentioned like on the Super NES, like it was just Mario games and platformer simple games. I never played like A Link to the Past because I'm sure like my dad's like, Mario's fine. Like he's just playing Mario and Doom. These are fine. But, like he introduced me to Ocarina of Time. He taught me how to glitch Pokemon, or I'm pretty sure even like showed me Pokemon first. And I'm like, I have this now. Actually, like one other thing with the Game Boy and why I think I'm also super into video games. My mom, when she was about to have me, was stuck in the hospital for like a month prior. Like there was just issues with me coming out, and she was playing Game Boy, playing Tetris. Oh. So I like to claim that that's the reason I'm super into video games, is because she just would play Tetris all the time, to the point that the nurses would like take it away from her because they're like, it's rotting your brain. And I'm like, that could cause it, that I'm just hearing just like trying to come out. Anyway, but yeah, so like Mike, like he was like a huge like, oh, I gotta play all these new games that I never saw before. And I was always a Nintendo kid. It was like Super NES, 64 to GameCube. And then by the time we got to like the GameCube generation, and this is where I'm very lucky growing up in that avid relationship and that kind of stuff. It's kind of crazy like how that affects people's like what they get interested in. So Avid was starting to get into like digital effects and stuff, and they were buying companies that would provide VFX work essentially to like video game studios too. So or they were like or partnering with companies. So we had access because of people my dad knew to basically get free PlayStation 2s, free
Ooh.
Xbox. So like it got to a point where I had every console. I had my pick of whatever games I wanted to because he would just get them free. They had an office in Montreal, right next to Ubisoft Montreal, and so he would go up to Montreal, and he knew people over at Ubisoft Montreal. See, we just did it twice there, and like he would bring back the Ubisoft games and just have them free, and so I just had access to video games, and yeah, just ended up playing a lot of video games.
Man, that's crazy. A lot like I feel like if we were in the same town, we would have been very close friends. A lot of the stuff you're describing. Also, if I wasn't an old person, if I was your
Fair. Let's take the age and push them together.
Yes.
And go from there.
If I was closer to you in age, for the record, I'm about 10 years older than you. So if we had, let's say, a 5-year, 4-year gap, maybe I think we would have been best friends because I have a lot of similar things in my upbringing. Video games were a huge thing. I remember my dad, we were driving cross country from, I don't know, Florida to California. And my dad said, I had this Pac-Man, I don't know like what they're called, but just the before the Asus and before the Steam Deck, it was these little handheld games, and it was just Pac-Man.
Kind of like the football,
yes,
with the beeps and the bloops. Yeah,
very similar to that. And it wasn't even like a officially licensed Pac-Man. It was like a bootleg Pac-Man. But my dad said I was entertained. I think I was about 4, and I was entertained from Florida all the way over to California. And it was like, it's amazing that I had that attention span, because today I would be bored by 5 minutes down the road.
Did you have a Game Boy as well? Like was it this way before Game Boy?
This was way before. I did have a Game Boy when they first came out, and Tetris and Mario were big.
And were you still doing this like travel like during this time too?
Yes, so we would fly a lot. So video games were huge, and I was a Sega guy. So my dad wanted me to be different. Like he didn't want me to. He was like, everybody's on Nintendo. So
Game Gear.
Yeah, I had a Game Gear. I was huge into Game Gear. He actually brought me back before the Genesis. It was the Sega Master System. That was the competing with the NES. And so he was like, everybody's got an NES. You're going to have a Master System. You're going to be the only one on the block. And I loved it. I was like, yeah, this is great. And then so from there, I was like, all right, I'm a Genesis guy. I'm a Sonic guy.
I was about to say, is Sonic like super important to you then?
Yeah. And Sega CD, 32X. Like I was all in on Sega, all the way up to the Sega Saturn, all the way up to the Dreamcast. And once they died, I was huge into Sega. But I was also, like you, in the background, I was getting Sonys, I was getting GameCubes, I was getting all the other ones, and then slowly transitioned to Xbox.
We would also still, even now I'm a teenager, and I still have this computer in my room. Notably like to do like homework and stuff. I think my dad could like see the future and that kind of stuff. They also trusted me. Probably not a good idea, but like we could talk about that in a different podcast. But like, so I would like was also starting to get into PC gaming. And was very into like learning how to connect to the internet. We also like, again, to the luckiness, like had high speed internet like very early on. Like we were early adopters on high speed internet. So I'm on GameSpy playing Battlefield 2. That was a huge one for me. But my dad, and I kind of mentioned this with the movies, he liked to do stuff earlier in the day.
Right.
So we'd do these errands, which were at some point we'd go to Stop and Shop, which is the Northeast big supermarket chain up there. But notably, we would like go to Comp USA first, and we'd go to the mall, and like Best Buy eventually opened, and he was into computers, so like that was his time to like find stuff to like purchase for computers or like DVDs, because we had a huge DVD collection because of Avid and all that stuff. But that was also when I could like get him to like buy me a game and be like because he would have a general sense because he would read PC Gamer 2, like kind of like what was coming out. Like I remember like Medal of Honor Allied Assault, for instance, as a big PC game.
Ooh,
And like we'd meet in
yes.
Comp USA and be the cardboard box with the discs in it, and it'd be like, oh, can we get this? Can we get this? And he'd like look at me and be like, okay, here's the deal. You're gonna leave it in the car when we get home. You're gonna wait till your mom takes her nap, and then you can bring it in. And like I learned how to install games on my PC and like played Battlefield 2 was a huge like like multiplayer game for me. I would say though, as a teenager, probably the most important games for me ended up being like sports games like NCAA football, because I would play those with like people in my neighborhood who weren't as nerdy, but this is where you could like, oh, let's play video games. I'd kick Kevin's ass, and to the point where I would just like leave and laugh going down the street. Sorry,
Oh,
Kevin,
wow.
if you're watching here.
Shout out, Kevin.
Shout out, Kevin. But also like Halo, especially when Xbox Live became a
Oh,
thing.
man.
So like Halo, similar
Yes.
to Star Wars, is a franchise that like is very special to me, and I will also just play whatever Halo comes out, because that's when the online gaming went to the Xbox and all that stuff.
I think you and I met on Halo Infinite. I think,
or Master Chief Collection, I believe.
Oh yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Because we're just like, hey, because our mutual friend William was probably like, hey, I got this a friend Vactor. I used to podcast with him. Can he play? Yes. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck not? Sorry, I don't know if you could swear.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, you can bleep it later. Put a funny like wart on there.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
What's like for you? So you said like Sonic, but like, is there another game that's like super important for you with like playing video games? Like,
well, along those lines of what you said about being unmonitored, or I was allowed. My mom and dad, they just trusted me. I was watching R-rated movies at 8 years old. I was playing violent video games. Mortal Kombat was
a good one.
A groundbreaking game for me. I was in the arcade, which that's another thing. I was a huge arcade, like I would be there every day if I could. But I obviously couldn't drive at that point, so my mom was dropping me off every weekend. And all right, here's $10, and you can be here for. I'm gonna go off for 3 hours and come back, and you have to make that last. So I was a huge arcade guy, but I was in the arcade one day. Actually, you know what? No, I take that back. We were watching a movie. I have no idea what the movie was, but I will never forget. Right before that movie,
like I'm like, yeah, Star Wars is cool and not dumb, like dumb Batman. Like I remember my neighbor for a little while like had Batman action figures, and in retrospect they're pretty cool, because it was like the like 89 Batman, like that Batmobile. There was like the Batman Forever, like the vehicles and the like those toys and such from what's the Clooney one, Batman and Robin. Like movie sucks, toys are great in retrospect, but I'm like, yeah, I don't like Batman and that stuff's dumb. Star Wars is cool. Plus there was like there was the sports stuff too.
Right.
So I'm like, I can only go so far with my nerdy stuff, and now no one cares. We just let our freak flags fly wherever we go.
I have a question for you, actually.
Sure.
Was your love of sports video games?
Ooh, this is where I'm like trying to like think like where the memories, because like I remember playing Wiffle, and this again, what's interesting about this is I mentioned like I lived in Europe for a little bit.
Yes,
but my dad wasn't like, so we were in England briefly, Monaco briefly. I don't have any memories of those two places, but I have slight memories of us being in Dublin. But we didn't like, there wasn't like soccer playing, and my dad like wasn't a soccer or like football fan. But like we'd play wiffle ball in our backyard, and no other kid in the neighborhood would know what wiffle ball was, because they're like, what is this? But like I do remember playing like Ken Griffey Jr. baseball on the Super NES.
Okay.
So then by that time, it is probably playing sports video games first, but not really totally understanding what I was doing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like I remember, I do kind of remember like Madden, and like not understanding like how to actually like run a play or like what it even was. But Madden 97 on the Super NES, and probably also on the Genesis version, had this like mini camp mode where you'd like create your character. And again, I'm like 5, so I'm barely understanding exactly what's going on, but it was just these drills, and you didn't have to play a full game. It was just like tap the B button as fast as possible to run the 40-yard dash.
Oh man, I remember that. Yes.
And that's actually like what set your created players like ratings, like how well you did in those drills.
That. Dang, I had forgotten about that. Yeah.
So like, see, it was probably like sports video games, and then by the time I came to the States, the first sporting event I can remember watching on TV was Super Bowl 30. one between the Patriots and the Packers.
Oh, yes. I was in
When
Korea when that happened. Yes.
yes, that's the one I can remember being like the first sports like game I watched. So now
Oh, man.
it's the video games and the Star Wars, and then also like sports. And
Mm.
again, my dad working at a big company and stuff. Plenty of corporate tickets to go around. So you get to go to Fenway Park and the TD Garden and see hockey. I loved hockey. Played a
Oh,
lot of hockey
man.
and hockey video games. That was all. Speaking of video games, with that. Sorry, I know I'm rambling here, but to my dad's like also playing video games, he would play like the NHL games, but the PC versions when they started getting like
Ooh,
the PlayStation like style graphics, and like
okay.
there was a time there were like PC versions of sports games were actually better than the consoles because they had better graphics,
Right.
and
Yes.
like
Yes.
you could super mod them to
Right.
like get the right player names. And so like he played that.
Yes.
He showed
Yes.
me
Yes.
like, if you come up to the circle here and shoot, you will score every time. And I'm like, why don't they do that in real life? But yeah, so
Man.
it's probably sports video games first before,
Okay.
but then it all kind of comes hand in hand where I got like really into like franchise gaming and season gaming. And it's like, okay, and also like creating players and like putting them into season mode and like we're going to be the best team in the league and that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
that kind of sports gaming.
Yes, I love all of that, and I, if you can believe, the way that I am now with superheroes, that's how I was with basketball. When I
Okay.
was growing up, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and everything like was filtered through a lens of basketball. So people would ask me, "Hey, what's your favorite movie?" "Oh, it's Space Jam," or whatever
Yeah.
basketball movie, and what's your favorite song? "Oh, basketball is my favorite sport. I like the way they dribble up and down the court." Like
Great
those.
opening to NBA 2K12, by the way, if anyone wants to look that up.
Yes. So I had that love of basketball first, and then I was like, oh, there are basketball video games, and I would say 90% of my Genesis time was there was Lakers versus Celtics, Bulls versus Blazers,
Yeah.
all of those EA,
The isometric NBA live
yes,
games.
yes, all of those games to me were like canon to me. Like those were the Bible to me. I was
Did you
like
play 2K on Dreamcast too? You mentioned a big.
yes.
Yeah.
So the first 2K was a revelation, and it was like that the 2K camera. Like I
Yep.
still to this day, I'm like, hey, that's the camera that
It's
I
the
love.
only one that you can play. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were talking about online, like that was the first one they had like the dial-up modem.
That's right,
And
on the Dreamcast. Yeah.
I was trying to connect. This is in Japan, so it was like it was already there was all these hurdles for me to get online. So I never actually played anyone, but I was able to access a browser on the Dreamcast. So I was like, oh, this is great. I'm on the internet, and I have to wait as it loads a page. But yeah, Dreamcast was a big one for me. But I also that same thing you said about modding and putting the players' names in, not to that extent on PC, but on the console, I was making like this is like how intense I was doing. I was making every trade as it happened. I was like, I have to know.
Or you just plug it in and they would give you roster updates
the
nowadays.
12th, yeah, right. Like it's crazy how easy it is now versus me. I think back on myself like, man, I wasted a lot of time trying to make sure that the Denver Nuggets roster to down to the 12th man was up to date. I was like, why did I do that? Because I never played with those teams.
Would you go into like message boards and like people would like to the point we were talking about the despecialized editions? And I think this is where sports can be nerdy, especially with sports video games. Would you like go onto like Operation Sports and like buy like a memory stick from someone? They're like, or like, if you send me your memory card, I will update your roster for you.
What's crazy, like I never did that. I would have been the person selling it. Like I remember being so precious about my memory cards. I was like, all right, I got to make sure this is the one that has the 97 Bulls on it. This is the one that has like so I was that person. Like I knew every player in the NBA. Like I think back and I was like, how did all of that knowledge and information, like how did I memorize all of these? But I just loved it so much. I loved the game of basketball, and I just wanted to consume it.
And you want to make it as and in the video game, because again they would produce the roster, and there would always be, if you like read like before it did like the opening cinematic, whether it was Madden, triple play baseball, NBA 2K, it's like rosters accurate as of X date. And you're like, well, that's not today. We got to figure this out. It's kind of crazy that we're now like talking about like sports on here, and I think like sports video games were like again allowed people who like sports to also be nerdy. I think something also like Moneyball helped with that, like the book,
Mm,
not the movie, although I did
right.
just watch the movie the other weekend. But for those who don't know, the concept of Moneyball was that the Oakland Athletics have a tiny payroll and they needed to find a way to actually like build a winning roster through like drafting and like finding diamonds in the rough. And the whole book is about how we can evaluate people, but also like using math and like sure baseball always had like batting average and RBI, but it's like what if those are the wrong numbers?
Mm,
And it's really was an intro to a lot of people in terms of like here are advanced numbers. Bill James had been around for a long time, but like these are advanced numbers that explain like how baseball teams actually win that they're not telling you. And you know, it is funny that the book came out in 2003, I want to say. And now that we're like talking about video games, like this all kind of coalesced into like one area where now like nerds run sports
right.
and like athletes still play and you still need to be an athlete. And even like the athletes are nerds now. Like how many times
Right.
do you see something and it's like, oh, that dude bleeping loves comic books, for
Oh yeah.
instance.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like, oh, Kyler Murray has a Twitch channel and he's
Yeah.
playing Call of Duty and like
Kyler Murray had to get written into his contract that he couldn't play Call of Duty anymore. That's how much he's a nerd.
yeah. So it's fascinating to me to think about like if I could tell myself in 95.
You know, what is more nerdy than like striving for like a full collection or like perfection or trying to figure out the glitch in the system that makes it
Right.
work? What's more
Right.
nerdy than that? And that's in sports nowadays.
Yeah. And it is that thing of like nerd is the new cool. Like
Yeah.
it's become the popular culture. I feel like the same thing with like hip hop to music. Like, it started out as kind of a fringe niche and then it just took over and it's like it's in all genres of music. And I feel like nerd is you look at what are the number one movies at the box office? Like what are the most popular things now? And there are so many video game, Star Wars, and comic book references in like popular movies, popular
Right.
music. Like it's just infiltrated every aspect of popular culture.
Even the biggest
Um,
movie from this past weekend, Mission Impossible, is essentially a superhero movie. Like Ethan
right,
Hunt at this point is a superhero. He's
right,
jumping off of cliffs
right,
with bicycles. Sorry,
right.
motorbikes. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting time now versus like you will not get bullied, I think, as much for liking these type of things as I did, when I was growing up or our parents did when they were growing up. So I just think it's an interesting thing to look at. And I did want to get your comic book canon event because I love you and our mutual friend, Mr. William Goodman, were talking about Jonathan Hickman's X-Men offline. We were in our
Yeah.
Discord, and I was like, a light bulb went off in my head because I haven't talked to you about comic books before. So like that was an indicator to me. Is like, oh, okay, I know from that conversation, I know exactly what type of comic reader he is. And so
I
I
almost
want
have type of cheese.
to Jonathan Hickman.
Things like Raimi's Spider-Man helped to change that. I didn't watch the Singer X-Men films.
Okay.
I think in this brain again that is like gotta be cool, but also like Star Wars is cool. It's like for some reason X-Men were like not cool because it's like they wear these like yellow suits and they're like this dude's got claws coming out of his hand. Like that's not cool. Obviously Wolverine's super cool nowadays, but like
Yeah.
the Raimi Spider-Man's helped. Things like Batman Begins and it started to be like, oh,
Ooh.
superheroes can be adult and like people like you read online like Batman, like, oh, this can work. And then for me, comics started to come a little bit later. I had a little bit more disposable income. I
Hmm.
never really was exposed to like a comic book store,
Ah.
not really until I was like in my mid 20s. But you'd go to Barnes and Noble even, and I'd like look up online, like quick Google search, best Batman stories. Like I gotta figure out like what I've been missing. Best Avengers stories, and you'd go buy the trades at like Barnes and Noble, and they'd be in those
Yes.
like things like Hawk, like this. Like I love this.
Yes.
This is actually speaking of this is from William. That's my entire book over there. You'd go to Barnes and Noble and you'd buy things like this, and you'd be like, "Oh, this is
Yes.
the entire run that started 5 years ago that I didn't read because I wasn't into comics." And then MCU definitely helped because it get established that like being nerds are cool. Not to out myself as a white boy who went to college. But in my fraternity, we were like we had like lots of little cliques like in our fraternity, and there was a group of us that like we kind of called like the secret nerd club, in the sense that it was like, oh, like we're gonna go to the parties and we're gonna drink and we're gonna pick up the girls. Also, did you guys? What do you guys think that off of? Like,
Oh
what do you like?
man.
Which comic run do you think that will be? They're talking about. They think the movie's going to be like the what did the Russos always say that the Winter Soldier is? But whatever they director bullshit on us.
Right.
You think like that's going to be like, oh, Ben Affleck's going to be Batman? And nowadays, like we don't have to be secret about it because we're not in college and we're not trying to impress any girls. And it's funny because we probably would have like there probably would have been girls who be like, I like Iron Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so now disposable income with comics, and you can and buy the trades, and then also there'd be the friends that would eventually lend you their Comixology accounts. Like, here's everything I've purchased over the years. Every time there was like an Amazon get 3 months of Kindle Unlimited, there's enough. If you Prime Day just went by, so if you did do the Kindle Unlimited and you want to go back for older comics, there's trades on there.
Yes.
I read basically all of the new Marvel Star Wars line using Kindle Unlimited of like the first series that was between New Hope and.
I love that series.
They're so good. Darth Vader's the best one of those.
Oh yeah, yes.
But they're like really good, and like there's some questionable art in one of the runs where like I really think the artist just like kind of looked at a still frames of Star Wars and just copied it, and you can tell which ones those are. But there are some, but like there's some fun stories that are going on there, and they're really easy to go through and read. But yeah, so like nowadays, and then I remember reading, and I think we teased it that we might be talking about it further. I remember reading Hickman's Avengers. So back to the secret nerds, us idiots, we go for our fantasy football draft. We go away. It's basically an excuse for us to have a bachelor party every year, and we were in Montreal in 20, and as mentioned before, our mutual friend Goodman, he let me into his Comixology account, and I think it was like the Friday night, and I went back first from the house. I was a little like tired, and we were in this big lounge area, and I'm just like, I'm not super tired, but I don't want to be out anymore. So I had a beer. I'm just like, why don't I read that Avengers line that William's been telling me to read? I'm just like going through it and stuff, and it must have been like 1 a.m. or something, and I remember like screenshotting something and sending it to William and be like, hey, did you not tell me to read this before? And I'm like, he's like, I've been telling you to read this for so long. Also, it's 1 a.m. What are you doing? And I'm like, I went back and I'm just sitting here in like this dark room. I'm probably like in like, let's be honest, I'm probably like in my underwear, just like reading this and like going, this shit's great.
Yes, that is fantastic. And I also had that period where I was discovering trades and things I couldn't find in back issues.
Yeah.
But having the whole story was, some people like the hunt of going and finding every issue, but me, I'm like, give me the whole story.
Yeah.
And I was able to consume a ton of Spider-Man through trades, and like his Black Costume days, and his Captain Universe days, like all these different Spider-Man stories, which they came out in the 80s, so I never would have come across them. Once they started putting them out in trades, and really that trade market, like you said, with Barnes and Noble and with Amazon,
and
they started to get.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Go support your comic book store if you can.
Yes. Once that started happening, that was when I think got pulled in to comics, and I could get complete storylines. So
right. It's really
easy
easy to pull somebody in when you can give them that complete story up front. Instead of the issue to issue, like you can, and especially now, not now, it's always kind of been that way, but it does feel like more where issues are like monthly.
Yes, right. Yes.
One thing with like Hickman's X-Men that helped is that there was like it might not have been Hickman's issue every week, but there was something in that X-Men line basically every week between issues. You would have like X-Men this week, and then you would have like X-Force the next week, and then by the time like every 5 weeks you would cycle through the next ones. And I think that really helped like that world. Obviously some books I enjoyed more than others, but I think like the X-Men line, and then honestly Coates' Black Panther line when it got to the Intergalactic Empire.
Yes.
I know the first line of that. Like I read those basically into like not by trades. I read those like fully issue to issue.
Yes.
My hot take is that I love the intergalactic line much better, and that's probably my Star Wars speaking, because I'm like, this is Black Panther in space. This rules.
Yeah, that I heard a lot of buzz around that, and that actually was coming out during a time where I had been Thanos snapped away, the blip happened, and I wasn't reading comics because my wife came into my life, and some like life just happened, and before I knew it, 5 years had gone by, and I was like, "Whoa, I need to get caught up on what I've missed." And that intergalactic storyline was coming out during that period, and I've heard so many things about it, but I just haven't got back to.
The worst part about it was not the actual story. It's that we stopped in March 2020 and we had to wait like a year for like the story to conclude. And we're sitting there and going like, please give us Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda.
Yes.
Please.
That's, you know what? It really reminds me of like binge, like Netflix, like when they release a whole season at once versus week to week.
What do you
That's how the
prefer?
comics, I kind of go back and forth. If I wasn't doing podcasts, if I wasn't doing online content, I would prefer the binge model of having the
He
whole
needs that
everything.
slow drip of content, that
Yeah, so
IV of content right into the
now I'm
vein.
like, weekly. Yeah, I could do weekly videos. This is much easier than when they release it all at once at midnight, and now I got to try to watch it all and put out a video about it. It's a lot easier when it's the slow drip, like you
It's
said.
way more
So
interesting, I think, week to week for that. For not just that reason, but like you can also have those conversations with people, and you don't have to do the awkward like,
yes,
"Well, how many episodes have you watched?" I've
right,
watched
right.
all of them. I've watched 6 of them. It's
Yeah,
like,
and you have to be worried about spoilers, and it's like that
right,
you'll
which
have
is
the
why you have to
people who
ask.
right, they'll stay up till 2 a.m., watch the entire thing, and then spoil you on like what happened at the end. It's like it just came out last night. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I do think that is part of the issue with, and not to go. I know we're doing my canon event, but like things like Secret Invasion, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
think has totally hit the mark.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they have made these shows. I think this is a problem with a lot of the Disney Plus shows, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars too, is that they kind of forgot that they are supposed to be episodes of television, and they're always kind of like, well, just wait till the end, and then you can watch the whole thing and watch it. It's like, well,
Right.
just put a 2.5 hour movie out.
Right.
Mandalorian works because up until this past season, but like, and it still does this in this season. You had the whole like the episode with like Jack Black and Lizzo, for instance. But there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of
Yes.
individual episodes in The Mandalorian. Not all of
Right.
them work, but they will tell the complete story from the beginning to the end of the episode.
Right.
The like Andor had the 3 episode blocks
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Right.
But I love the character of Ahsoka. I love what's coming in Rebels. I look at that trailer and I'm like, this should have been this feels like it should be just a 2.5 hour movie. Like, are we really gonna get enough stuff out of this? And I'm finding that with Secret Invasion. Like, I don't know if that movie would have been any good, but I think it would be better than trying to build on story that isn't necessarily there. Plus, then you can put a budget behind it and it can look better.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is I'm enjoying Secret Invasion, but if it had been a movie and they had a budget, I feel like number one, like you said, it would have looked better. And I feel like they would have had other heroes in it. It wouldn't have just been this. The stakes in this show feel so low to me.
Especially
And
compared to what that's, especially, yeah, you're about to say it. Go ahead.
right, the comics that it's based on, it was the entire Marvel universe. Like every
Mhm.
character was affected. And this show, it's like, all right, we've only got these actors. And if it had been leading up to an Avengers, something, we would have gotten Captain America, we would have got Iron Man or something along those lines. That would have made it feel more essential versus
Mhm.
now it's like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's nice, a little side thing. You can find out what Nick Fury was up to, but it doesn't feel as important to me as like Loki. I don't know. Like the other shows, WandaVision, have felt more important to me than this one has.
I don't even know if like things feeling important. I think honestly, I think that's one of our biggest issues when it comes to comic book story making. Is like, what does the Flash mean for the future of the DCU? What is Secret
Right.
Invasion? It's like, why can't we just make it like?
Yeah, and I think Marvel really like trained us like the
Yeah,
success in
in
the
a bad way.
MCU, right? the success of that led us to the point of when I watch something and I'm conscious of it, but I'm still saying, okay, well, what does this connect to? And what was the importance of this story in the grand Marvel universe? And like you said, with the Flash, it's the same way with in the whole DC thing. I would like to get just a single story and just have it be enjoyable. But then I felt like then what almost like what was the point of me watching? Like if I'm going to give you
which is
6 hours of
bad.
my time, right? Have it lead up to something. And I wonder if we had never gotten the MCU, would we still be in that mindset, of this has to lead to something else?
Well, I think they've lost a little bit of what the power of comics are. And that
Mm,
is that we can Vactor, you can write a Spider-Man story. And sure, there's some established canon about like who Spider-Man is. He's a kid from Brooklyn who was sorry, Queens. But he's a kid from Queens, and he got bitten by a radioactive spider, and maybe recently Green Goblin died or something. So you can't like put Harry Osborn in there. But when you're writing that comic, you're not super beholden to everything that came in the past. You just need to
right.
write a story about Spider-Man, and you have certain characteristics of Spider-Man, but ultimately you're and his rogues gallery, but ultimately you're just trying to write a great story about Spider-Man. And the reason it works is because we have familiarity with the character, not necessarily with the plot points that happened in there. And I think the MCU has kind of lost that part of it, where they think it's plot and character. The reason Avengers Infinity War and Endgame works so well is not because of those characters, and by extension those actors. We love those people, we love those characters. I've watched them all, so I can tell you what happened, but someone should be able to go to those movies and know those characters and know what they're about, and that's the reason they enjoy it. One of the reasons like Winter Soldier is so good, besides the fact that it's early in that the storyline of the MCU, because like we know who Captain America is, we know who Black Widow is, and the Bucky spoiler for a movie from 2011, but Bucky, being the Winter Soldier, we know that character because that character was established. And yes, there is a plot reason he's not there, but it's we saw those characters have that interaction. And I think they've, for lack of a better word, have lost the plot, where they think the plot and what builds to that next thing is what the people care about. I don't think it is. They care about the characters.
Right. And we've gotten to the point now where the continuity, I think, has started to become a burden on. All right,
Right.
there's 30 Marvel movies. So if I'm introducing my son, right now my son is 2 years old, but let's say once he gets to watching age, there's going to be 50 Marvel movies out at that
Right.
point. And I'm going to love rewatching all of those with him. But I wonder if he's going to feel like, oh no, I have to watch 50 movies just to get caught up and see what's going on in the current movie.
And that's the issue. It cares so much more about the plot. You should be able to just be like, let's watch this Spider-Man movie, and maybe there's a little bit of exposition in there that kind of explains like what happened before, what's going on. But this thing should stand alone. And right now,
Yes.
the things in Marvel do not stand alone, except for like Guardians 3, which is kind of its own standalone universe in that. But
Right.
that's a sequel. Like
James
the
Gunn
the beauty,
trilogy.
yes, as we do the tenant sign here, the beauty of Guardians is like, yeah, you do kind of have to watch 1, 2, and 3, but that's only 3 movies.
Right.
That is a trilogy of movies, much like the original Star Wars trilogy, where it's a trilogy of movies, and that's the storyline there. Again, to the point with the comics, I can pick up an Avengers right now, and I need to tell us what happened in 2004. They put the little box in the corner that says, "Hey, dear readers, this happened in Avengers." You can go back and read that if you want to, but the story that matters is what's on the page right there. And too much of Marvel is the story is here, and it's here because this is happening in continuity with that. And we don't really care about what's going on here because this thing gets us here. Let's worry about telling here.
I wonder with this James Gunn DC universe, how much they're going to be beholden to that. Hopefully, like you said, they can have standalone stories that fit together, but they also work as individual pieces,
Yeah.
and you can still, get
You can
you
have
can
your team up. You can
still
have your team up stories. You can have your event comics.
right.
Maybe that's what we're saying here. Marvel's like tried to turn everything into an,
I think that's true.
and like Event comics work because we've read stuff for a whole year, and
And
then also with event comics, we also have those like prequel to Civil War. Like we have those comics that are like, here's everything you actually need to know before we start this event.
right. And I think it's, you know, okay, the budget is this much for this movie, so we have to, and you know, it takes this long to make the movie.
Yeah,
They're the constraints of that, everything has to be like, oh, we have to get everybody out to the theater. You know, not, we want to wait for Disney Plus or whatever. Like we have to make it an event so that they want to go to the movies. So I don't know exactly how they solve that portion of it, but I'm with you. I want character to be first, and I want that to be what drives everything. Is I want to know what's happening to Tony Stark. I want to know what's happening to Barry Allen, and not necessarily, oh, the flashpoint that leads to the end of this DC universe that leads to another.
right.
Yeah. So that,
Also, kind of going back to the Secret Invasion thing, you mentioned constraints. Constraints can be good.
right.
Instead
The
of having
original
6
Star
hours
Wars.
instead of having 6 hours to do something, tell the story in 2.5 hours. You might find you tell a better story. Also, you talk about those budgets, and now we're really off topic here. But did you see yesterday we got a new trailer for another nerd type thing? It's an original sci-fi movie. Did you see the trailer for The Creator?
Oh, I did not.
Okay, so The Creator is a movie coming out in September starring John David Washington, who I only want good things for, from Gareth Edwards. It's a new sci-fi movie. Gareth Edwards loves scale. He's really good with scale. He is the main director of Rogue One, but that's a complicated thing. Regardless, when you watch this trailer, it looks really good. It looks like put some real care and work into it. Do you know what the budget for The Creator was?
I have no idea.
The budget's only $86 million.
Ooh.
Which 86 million sounds like a lot, but like compared to like a Marvel budget where it's like 250, 300 million, and The Creator looks better than those movies. So I'm starting to wonder, like, what are the budgets being used for? Like,
Right.
did we lose the plot on like what goes into making these movies? And they might have, and they forgot to put constraints on their movie making. And I know we're in sad boy territory with nerd stuff. We can pull it back to happy stuff, but that's
Well, actually, you know what's crazy about that? I just listened to, there was a 4-part podcast documentary by the Wall Street Journal called With Great Power.
okay.
And the beginnings of the MCU, there was a specific guy behind the scenes that was holding them within,
Not
no,
Kevin, I assume.
the
Okay.
the person who actually feuded with Kevin and lost, and so he is no longer there. He is, I mean, he's at Marvel, but he's no longer in charge of the films. And so I wonder, when that happened, when Kevin Feige went, and like Ant-Man, there was like, all right, we're gonna make Ant-Man for 60 million. He was like, okay, that's good. And then they came back, okay, we need 80 million. He's like, wait a minute. And it
And
ended up being
Ant-Man
like 160 million at the end of the day. And that guy was like fuming. And so he was butting heads with Kevin Feige. Anyways, this podcast documentary is really good, if you have a chance. But now Kevin Feige is kind of like and there's no one there to tell him, hey, let's pull the budgets back. So that
well,
is
it's Bob.
interesting.
It's Bob. It's Bob, but Bob's also concerned right now about how to fix his yacht and screwing over writers and actors. But that's a completely
Right.
different story for a different day.
Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff. Man, we got to have another episode where Benti comes back and we talk about all of these things, because you have been a great resource, my friend, for
Thank you.
all of these worlds. You have a great amount of knowledge of, I think, sports and video games are your like bread and butter, but
Yep.
the Star Wars, the comic book, like all of these things, I think you are a person of great interest who I would watch watch your career with great interest. So I think I want to have you back in the Vactor-Verse, and we have been talking about, like, as you hinted at earlier, doing a Hickman Avengers episode. So I would definitely want to get you back for that.
Vactor, are you saying, is there an upcoming series that I know Hickman just put something out, but is there something this fall that perhaps has to do with something Jonathan Hickman is working on right now that we might be able to preview? Essentially, does it involve ultimate things?
There is, man. This is like in my brain right now. There were so many branching timelines that just went off, and I saw I was doing a whole segment on Jonathan Hickman, But yes, there is a brand new.
Bringing
I
back
don't
the
even,
let's be honest, they're bringing back the Ultimate Universe. Like that's
which
what it is.
I don't. There's so many things I want to talk to somebody at Marvel and be like, why? Why are you doing this? What is the plan? What is the purpose? Because again, we talked about, oh man,
God Emperor Doom.
we,
This because we were just saying Hickman. This was purchased at a little game, little like toy store in Winchester, Virginia, where I had my wedding by Goodman, who was my best man at my wedding, and he's like, "Here's your wedding gift." And they're like, "God Emperor
nice.
Doom." Yes,
That is fantastic. But that's bringing back the Ultimate Universe is kind of like that thing that we just talked about with the burden of continuity, because at the beginning of the Ultimate Universe, the whole appeal of it was there was no continuity. Everything was starting fresh. 10 years into it, it was like, all right, you got to read 150 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man now to get caught up. So why are they bringing it back? Like, what is the end game by doing that? I want to
probably a little bit of that like new continuity, but like yeah, the Ultimate Universe, and this is from somebody who read it all after the fact, like when it was a thing for the most part,
yes,
from me.
yes.
But I almost feel like the Ultimate Universe was way more beholden to its canon, and part of again that issue that's kind of in the movies is like things that happened in 2000 really mattered for things that happened in 2009. And 616, you don't really have that issue where you can just write an X-Men story, and maybe it will fold into greater things that they're doing right now. But at the end of the day, you don't really have to know too much about what happened in 1997. Like, but in the Ultimate Universe, it kind of felt like, wait, why is Kitty Pryde like macking on Spider-Man? Like, what's going on here?
Yes.
Like, it kind of felt like they were almost too interconnected. But
Right.
probably there's an opportunity here to, and they love the character of the Maker. Like, they absolutely love him. But that's an opportunity there too.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy that they almost treat him with as much respect as they do Miles Morales. Like, they saved both of those characters. Those are the only ones that survived the Ultimate Universe. But yeah, we definitely will be talking about Ultimate Invasion later on this year. And I think Goodman, Benti, and Vactor are going to be the Hickman Brain Trust.
I will go to this Airbnb in Montreal again, and I will sit in this lounge chair, and it'll be dark at 1 a.m., and I'll be on my iPad and probably I was just in my underwear because you're drunk and you're like, also there's no AC in Montreal because they're very European. So this was August, and I'll probably be there. I should just like go back to like when I first read those stories, and now it's Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers more notably, which, as we're kind of alluding, that was the end of the Ultimate. That led to the end of the Ultimate Universe. Find something that matches better than Hickman writing Doom. But yeah, the end of the Ultimate Universe there, and then Secret Wars. Yeah, good stuff, as they say.
Man. Well, Benti, I cannot thank you enough for joining me here in the Vactor-Verse. I want to let everybody know that Benti is a fantastic Twitch streamer. I'm going to have links to all of his stuff online. You can find his link tree and everything there in the show notes, as well as the things that we mentioned in this podcast during this episode. But is there anything, Benti, that you want to point out? Do you want to tell anybody about something
I'll
right
say
now?
I'll say you can typically find me on things, whether it's Twitter, it's Twitch, it's TikTok, etc. It's usually going to be cbenti60, as you can see right up there. That's that has like the Twitch up there, but like, that's gonna be TikTok, whatever's on the link tree there. So if you don't want to click on the link tree, you're just like, I'm gonna find him myself. That's probably gonna be the username. The only one that isn't is going to be Playback, which is a newer streaming service that I'm a part of. That's going to be places for like live watch parties of sports. So if you want to nerd out with me and watch Celtics games this fall or Bruins games this fall, you can come do that with me. And that's going to be at playback.tv/BentiTV. But for the most part, cbenti60. That's where you'll find me on stuff. Mostly, again, Twitch. TikTok is where I tend to do most of the stuff. I might experiment with YouTube soon on terms of like live streaming there, maybe for like different type of stuff. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
That is fantastic, my friends. Like I said, don't forget to check out everything that Benti's doing over in the show notes down below. If you had something that was of interest to you in this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know. Tell us what your favorite Dr. Doom moment is. And while you're down there, give Benti his flowers, give him his props. You will be seeing him again here in the Vactor-Verse, but I did want to let everybody know that Benti loves comics, and you should too. We did it.